So in the last video, we just ended off by labeling the M and the B. So I'm just going to go ahead and start by graphing this pink or question graph B, sorry. So we're going to start at +3, which is up here. And this time, remember that the slope is rise over run. So to do rise over run, in this case, we're rising down 1. And we're going to run 3 to the right. It's always to the right. That negative is at the top, so it only affects the rise. So we're going to go down 1 and to the right 3. Down 1, to the right 3, down 1, to right 3, and so on and so forth. We're going to do the same on the opposite side just to make this line a little bit better. This time we're going to go up 1 and to the left 3. That's enough coordinates. You don't really need to continue here. I'm not assessing graphing the lines. I'm assessing if you can find the point of intersection at this point. So as you can see, there's a point here that these two lines cross. And that point of intersection, if we want to label it at x equals 3, so when x equals 3 and y equals 2, that's when we find that one point of intersection. So if you predicted properly, then that's good. You should have predicted this by looking at the slopes. So if we take a look at the slopes, we can tell that the slopes are different. So if the slopes are different, you're only going to have one situation, especially if you look up here. The only time that the slopes are different is in option 1. So in option 1, we can see that there's only one point of intersection, and that's because the slopes are different. So because the slopes are different, we should see that it is a point of intersection. That's the only thing that really helps. We can also say that the y-intercepts are different. And so in this case, we know there's one point of intersection. And I'm actually going to label it right on the side. If x is 3 and y is 2, your point of intersection should look like this, with the brackets and the comma. So for question B, the first graph, or equation, is already in y equals mx plus b form. So this makes it a little bit easier to label your m, which I'm hoping you see is 1 over 2, and your b value, which is 2. However, for the second graph, not so easy to see, so we're going to need to rearrange this. And I need to make sure that the y is all by itself, just like over here, where it's y equals mx plus b. So to cancel out what's around the box, I need to add x on both sides. And I also need to add 4 on both sides. So we're left with 2y equals 0 plus x plus 4. Now if we divide everything by 2, okay, 2 divided by 2 is 1, so that gives us 1y. 0 divided by 2 is 0. We don't need to write that at this point. Then we have x over 2. This usually causes a few problems, but I'll get back to that in a second. And then 4 divided by 2. You might as well reduce that. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So in order to label the slope, you need to make sure that you know what number is in front of that x. And I don't really like using this form. It's very confusing. Students have a really hard time figuring this out. So what I'd like you to do is, instead of just having over 2, I want you to put a 1 in front. And I want you to rewrite this as 1 over 2, then the x, and plus 2. So both forms are the same. There's no difference. It's just that one form is a little bit more confusing to look at than the other. So to graph that, we need an m, which is our slope, and our slope is 1 over 2, and our b is equal to 2. So you can make your prediction at this point based on the information that I just wrote here. Give you a second to write that information down. Do you think it's 1, 0, or an infinite amount? And I'm going to go ahead and graph. If you're not done writing, then just finish up writing and then follow through. So for the blue graph, or graph A, if you want to call it graph A, we're going to start at 2. And then because the slope is rise over run, we have a rise of 1, which I'm going to rise up because it's positive. And I'm going to run to the right. So up 1, to the right 2. And it creates a nice line for us. Instead of having coordinates just to the right, we're going to have coordinates to the left as well. So we're going to go down 1, to the left 2. down 1. Oh, I didn't do that right. I went to the left 3 by accident. Now this looks like a nice line that I could put a line through. And that's graph A. Now for graph B, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to start at 2 because the y-intercept is 2. And as you can notice, the slope is actually the same. So if I go up 1 to the right 2, it ends up being the exact same line. And when it's the exact same line, you might see one color over the other, but you really shouldn't because it's the same line. And when it's the same line, if you go back up here as your reference, this is a really good page to have in your survival guide. Since it's the same slopes and the same y-intercept, we have an infinite amount of points that intersect. So that should have been your prediction, an infinite amount of points. It's points because there's more than one of intersection. There are quite a few going on here. Okay. I'm going to get you guys to do C on your own to practice this, and when I get back on Tuesday, we'll take a look at it. But I also want you to work on this worksheet right here. And I know the answers are at the bottom, but you don't have to graph in order to be able to tell what's happening. But if it asks you to explain using your slopes and your y-intercept, that means I want you to label your slopes and your y-intercept. You have enough room to do it over here. So I'm going to do question A with you to show you what I want. Okay, so this is your success criteria. I want you to make sure that you write the slope for both equations. So the slope for the first equation is 6. The slope for the second equation is 4. And the y-intercept for the first equation is 1. And the y-intercept for equation 2 is 2. Now I want you to go back to your sheet and take a look at your slopes first. I can see that both slopes are actually different. Since the slopes are different, then I can tell, let me go back up here. Since the slopes are different, there's going to be one point of intersection. Okay, so you have to write that down. Slopes are different. Actually, it's slopes and y-intercepts. Slopes and y-intercepts are different. Oops, I'm sorry, I can't write tonight. Which means there is only one point of intersection. So this is what I want to see. I need 2 sentences. I need you to tell me if the slopes are the same, if the y-intercepts are the same or different, and then you need to tell me how many points of intersections there are. So 2 pieces of information for each question. So if you don't want to write it out, then you'll need to type it out, but you don't really necessarily have a computer with you, so you'd have to type it out at home. But for now, you can write all of your slopes and write down all of your B's, and at least write down if there's 1 or 2 points of intersection.